Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NIL Edge, the show where the people shaping the future of NIL talk to us about how they're doing it, what's working, and how they're looking to improve it for student athletes. If you're inside an athletic department, a brand, or an athlete, or the parent of a student athlete, this is the spot for you. Each episode, we talk to NIL directors, brand leaders, and other innovators that are pushing the NIL game forward. Our goal is to share success stories, equip you with ideas, maybe a spark, and create a trusted space for NIL strategy, education, and alignment. The show is produced in partnership with NIL Newsstand and Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern. My name is Sterling Randle, and I'm your host. I come from the world of strategic communications. Before that, I worked in collegiate athletic departments as an SID. So I've seen firsthand how critical communications, compliance, and brand building have played a role in getting to where we are in today's NIL era. Now I work with brands and organizations at the intersection of sports and strategy. I help them navigate change, protect reputations, and I help connect athletes to fans and businesses in meaningful ways. Today, I'm really excited to talk to Tate Gillespie from Players Health and learn more about insurance and its role in the NIL era. Without further ado, let's do it. Today, we are very, very, very happy to be joined by Tate Gillespie, who's the Vice President of Strategy and Partnerships for Players Health. Before his time with Players Health, he served as the inaugural NIL Director for Kansas and had stops at Campus Inc. as well. And we might get into it a little bit later, Tate, but we also have some time as a professional baseball player. So how the heck are you? And thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, man. Doing great. On the baseball part, you certainly didn't see me in the World Series last week, as we're taping this in early November. But no, it's been great to kind of have this jump and, be now working in the world of sports. Excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about your history with NIL, and tell us how you got to Players Health and Players Health involvement with NIL. I know that was kind of a big question to ask there right from the rip.
No, I mean, hey, it is the number one question I get at, when I'm around in-laws, meeting people out at a bar. It's how the heck did you get into this crazy world of NIL? Because it seems like, an industry so many folks are obviously intrigued with, and it gets talked about, and a blessing and a curse where you can't go escape it. Really, I can't go turn on a game or, turn on SportsCenter without it being talked about. So it's a very repeated question I get a lot. And it's one I think my, journey and my story with it is, like everyone in this space, is really unique. And before I get into it, I will say, Sterling, you and me have talked about this. What I think is so cool about the NIL space is how unique everybody's journey is, because of how new of an industry it is, how unique it is. If you go look at myself, the Ben Chase, other folks you've had on here, Ben was in a van for a year rolling around the country. And you're like, man, and now he's entrusted to run the NIL program, one of the premier institutions in the country. So, my background with it, I grew up, my dad was a college basketball coach. So I grew up jumping around different campuses, grew up in those locker rooms. My brother played, basketball collegiately and professionally. Somehow I was not a basketball player. Didn't get those genes, but so I really grew up around it, understood how the business of college sports, really worked from the time I was a kid. Obviously played, collegiately myself, went through that time, had my time as a professional athlete, and then a little bit of luck and a little bit of timing where my playing career, ended right as, 2021 and this crazy new world of NIL popped up on us. And my background really lended pretty well to where this industry was going and what was needed. So as a player, I also had time working in the MLB commissioner's office out in China. So I was running all around China, helping them with player marketing and government relations. So really took a lot of that experience, had my time at Talkwalker, where I led a lot of our collegiate sales, to really working with partners, working with universities and institutions as they're all trying to figure this out, in the stone ages of 2021. And everybody had a different approach. Everybody was unique to it. And what was great about that is, got to work with Kansas as a partner, in that current role. And they said, hey, we need to create a role that is just, solely focused on NIL, somebody to come in and kind of take the reins on this, because it's a all hands on deck. It's NIL by committee. And it's a tough way for a department to do it. So in 2022, when that opportunity came up, my wife was like, "Hey, never been to Lawrence, Kansas, but let's go to Lawrence, Kansas." We were living in Phoenix at the time, and she was all about it. But really, that's where kind of my journey with NIL took me and how I got to Lawrence. And, from there, it's been a fun journey.
So from Talk Walker to Kansas to Campus Inc. to now with Players Health, tell us a little bit about Players Health, what Players Health is, what Players Health does, and then how insurance and all of that rolls in together to NIL today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Players Health, what I think is really cool about, Players Health entry into the space is, I say this in a good way, like not an NIL focused company, not an NIL startup. They've really, built a lot of the bones and the structure of the organization over the last 10 to 15 years. So it's a very well-established organization, one of the leaders, in the US around sports insurance. So working with some of the, major providers, major partners in the country on sports insurance. And really, our founder, CEO, Tyree Burks, me and him have a friendship that goes back a few years when he was starting to do kind of some market research into this space about like, okay, hey, what's going on, in collegiate athletics? What's going on, in NIL? How settlements down, coming down the boat potentially, rev share could be on the docket. What does that look like from his brain, a risk management insurance side? And one of the leading questions he asked me at the time was like, this is when I was at Kansas. He said, "Hey, you guys get an athlete that gets injured, you spend all this money on him. What's the financial plan behind that?" And I was like, there isn't one. Truthfully, like nobody had a plan behind that. It was very much just, all right, our donors are going to go out and raise all this money, and our MGAs are going to go put all this work in to raise money, and we're just going to hope that it's a good investment and a good return. And of course, him and his insurance expertise was like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I was like, well, if somebody wants to, come up with a solution for it, then by all means, be my guest. So, and, he's a very convincing guy, very good recruiter, and, convinced me to come over and lead the collegiate division here. So what we've been able to do is essentially take what Players Health built, in athlete safety, in organizational safety, very well established in the insurance space, and really take a super focused NIL lens to it. So we're the collegiate division, the newest vertical within a very well-established company. And really what I've been able to do is build out what I think is a stellar team of guys that have been in this space just as intimately, if not more, than I have. And that allows us to work with our university partners to really kind of be the perfect middleman and translator between insurance and NIL, two things that 2 years ago nobody thought would have any intersect. But it's become one of the leading pieces that universities are now incorporating into their NIL strategy.
Yeah, it's funny that you say, you're the newest vertical in an established company in a space that's been around for a very, very long time, right? Because you can make that parallel to NIL as a whole, right? Brand new space in collegiate athletics, which has been around for a very, very long time. So tell me a little bit about like your team and the collegiate side of Players Health. What's your guys' day-to-day like, and who else is on your team with you?
Yeah, so I'll give a shout out to my guys, Jordan Poydras, Jake Lindsay, Shaq Rashad. If you've been in the NIL industry, in the college industry, you probably know those guys. And that's been, the purpose and the thought, behind bringing people like that in. We didn't really want to have people, that you have to teach about the NIL industry. It's really tough, right, to do that. So I intentionally wanted to go out and bring people in that knew this industry very well, but knew it from different angles than I did, right? Like I understood the university administration angle really well. Okay, what didn't I understand, at a super intimate level? Well, how does a coach think about this? Jake Lindsay's the former assistant men's basketball coach and functional GM at Grand Canyon for the last few years, helped build that team, build that roster. That's a program that, consistently punches above their weight. And he was a big reason for that. Shaq Rashad, he's done a lot of work with PFF, really understands football analytics at an intimate level. former NFL player, started and ran UNC's collective. So he understands how a collective operates, how they think through a lot of this stuff. But a true football analytics sicko like Jake is on the basketball side with basketball analytics. When I'm on a call and we're, doing a campus visit and those guys get to talking, analytics with their counterpart being a GM on the football or basketball side, I kind of just try to remove myself. And I'm like, hey, if anybody wants to talk baseball, I'm here. I can do that. But and then Jordan Poitras is our lead insurance producer on this. He's formerly with Open Doors, and formerly a collegiate professional athlete himself. So all former college and some of us professional athletes, but guys that have worked in the collegiate athletic space where we're coming in with really well built relationships, credibility, and really we get to go in and immediately speak the language of our counterparts that we work with every day. And that's a big value coming from the other side. Is when I'm sitting in that chair, like I was at Kansas, who can really understand the pain points that I'm going through? Who understands how hard it is to build a roster, how hard it is to retain and recruit players?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that you want in the foxhole with you and helping kind of build out a lot of these strategies. So those guys are awesome. Our day-to-day looks like, working with, 30 plus universities now, across every Power 5 school, every Power 5 conference, and just about every G5 conference now at this point. So really is Jake and Shaq, being the head of football and head of basketball respectively. Those guys are talking to football staffs and basketball staffs and their GMs and coaches about, okay, hey, let's take a look at your roster. How have you built this team? Where is your risk, right? From both an injury side, where does that risk line up? Okay, great. Here's how we can help you protect that. They're going to them with help on, we're taking a look at these 5 players. What is the risk profiles of some of these athletes? So helping coaches understand the risk that inherently comes with putting a roster together, right? So that's working with athletic directors, CFOs, coaches, GMs, collectives. It's a crazy world out there, but we're helping our partners navigate it.
And I think that's a great segue to my next question. When you're thinking about all of this, it's like being a GM, roster management, a salary cap, insurance is probably the last thing that you would associate with all of this. So how does insurance and players' health actually help protect athletes, schools, and those that are other financially invested in the programs?
Yeah. So really what we find ourselves in right now, obviously, we're post-house, we're in the rev share era, but we're still without, a firm, obviously, collective bargaining aspect to collegiate sports. So we continue to operate in this, kind of gray area, right? Where there's some structure and there's some formality, but it's not exactly bulletproof, as we all know from, being in this space, right? So really where insurance comes in is you're inherently taking a lot of risks as a coach, as a GM, right? Even if you're signing an athlete to a multi-year contract, okay, great. How enforceable is that buyout? We've all seen a lot of issues arise there. You're going out and you're raising donor money to go fund a player and, put your roster together, right? Well, you need to have some assurances there, from a risk management standpoint, that money is going to be well spent, it's going to be protected, and it's going to go towards its intended use, right? So where insurance has come up and really kind of, I will say hit this, the speed button on this all is being on the other side of the house settlement. Now that universities are the ones writing checks, it's coming from university paper, it's passing through a CFO's desk. Now all of a sudden universities are essentially forced to be a little less laissez-faire with how they spend these dollars. No longer allows a university to kind of put the hand up and say, oh, it's coming from a collective, a third party that, we're not directly associated with. Now I look at it this way. Every other aspect of a high functioning athletic department university, insurance is a core component of all that. Every square foot of the stadium they pack on a Saturday has insurance tied to it. The coaches, the employees of an athletic department, they all have massive amounts of insurance tied to it. It's a normal part of daily life. It's no different. Well, now you're going and you're spending $20 million plus every year on your athletic talent. There's no other business where you would have a $20 million budget that you wouldn't have a form of insurance around. And I think that's been the mind switch that a lot of athletic departments have taken now is, oh, okay, we have to treat this like any other part of our business. We have insurance on every other aspect of this business.
Mm-hmm.
No different now. Taking a page out of the NFL, NBA, MLB playbooks,
Mm-hmm.
common practice there. Now it's part of professionalizing college athletics.
I think I love what you said about like the laissez-faire attitude that collegiate athletics has, because it was like, all right, we're NIL is now a thing, and collectives are helping us get money to players, and we don't really care like where it's like we don't care how it gets there. We just care that it gets there. You know, there's obviously like so many red flags and so many like alarm bells that go off, right? Because like you said,
it's totally fine.
yeah, like it's the dog in the house on fire meme, right? Like this is fine.
Yes.
And like you said, like any self-respecting company that is worth $20 million would have all of this insured. What are the conversations that you guys have had with universities and athletic departments as you show them like, hey, these are the common risks and blind spots that come with NIL, and how do you explain to them how insurance can help them?
Yeah, so really there is a ton of education that's associated with what we do, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, who would have thought that NIL and insurance would be a thing that comes together like this? If you would have asked me 2-3 years ago, like, Tate, do you ever think you'll work in insurance? I'm like, no, I work in college sports. I work in NIL. Now, all of a sudden, I'm the direct middleman and the translator to this. But what's been cool about it is how universities have kind of adopted some of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot of education. It's a lot of, we start with risk visibility, right? That's the first thing that we do with our clients is we actually go in and we show them, hey, here is the risk behind, putting this roster together, whether that's from an injury standpoint, from a transfer standpoint. What's the likelihood of this athlete you're recruiting that, based on our models and our data,
Yeah.
what's the likelihood that athlete is going to end up transferring before the end date of this contract? That's a risk that you need to take into account. What is this athlete's injury history? What is their medical history? You need to take that into account. That's a risk. This is the same thing that, professional sports do and have done for decades. But what's unique about it is in the college space, these decisions, especially in the portal, get made within hours, right? Of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we're going to go throw 7 figures at this athlete. Oh, shoot, he just went in the portal. You don't have time to go do medical records, checks, talk to, the trainers and the physicians from his last school. Sometimes they won't get on the phone with you because like, that's no longer our athlete, not our problem. Well, great. What are you going to go do? Google this athlete's injury history and try to find it. So that is what we do on our part. We have the injury database, that we've tapped into. We've pulled it all together, and we can showcase for coaches that stuff in a matter of minutes. So I compare this actually right now to the European soccer transfer market there, where they have minutes. Sometimes you get a phone call, hey, do you want this athlete? Yes or no. And that's really how decisions get made now. So when we take that model and apply, risk visibility towards it, that's where a lot of our value comes in. And then once you've seen, oh man, we have a lot of exposure in these 1 or 2 areas. If I take a look at my running back room and I see that 3 of these guys are flashing red, from a high transfer or high injury risk, I'm probably going to put some form of protection around that, whether that's injury insurance or transfer insurance. And then you can even go into, all right, how are you structuring your contracts from a bonus and incentive piece? Okay, great. Insure that so that you can have some financial stability and financial, backing on this. So really, those are the 3 areas where it comes down to educating, risk visibility, and ultimately providing the tools to help them protect themselves.
I'm going to put you on the spot here with this question, but what you just said made me think of this, and we kind of went over it a little bit, but what are the common misconceptions as it relates to insurance and NIL that coaches, administrators, or university staffers have?
Honestly, this is going to sound funny, so try not to laugh. It is one of the most common questions we get is, oh, I didn't know that was even possible. I didn't know that was a thing. because frankly, it wasn't a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what's happening now in the market as it's developed, it's always been a common practice for universities to purchase insurance
Mm-hmm.
for their top athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a certain type of insurance really that's, typically known as kind of a loss of value. You would see university purchase this for an athlete who, hey, come back for one more year instead of going into the draft, or come play in this bowl game, and really that's a very kind of a little bit antiquated, product, just because it's so hard. It's nearly impossible to actually get a payout on it. It's a check the box, like, okay, hey, it's a nice thing to have. Where you start getting into some more tailored products that are based on like actual, chance of a payout from a season-ending injury, anything like that that's going to cause an athlete to miss significant time in a season, and essentially is valued at their NIL contract amount. So a lot of it is, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. And then it's like, yes, it is. Here's all the different ways that we can help tailor this to how you guys are doing it.
Okay, so to go one more off of that, once they do know that it's a possibility, does it open their eyes and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so many things there's so many ways that we can work this in and use this? Or do people just kind of see it as not, I don't mean to take this as a bad way, but do they see it just like as insurance, as like it's there? It's like my car insurance. It's there if I get in an accident, but hopefully I don't have to use it.
Yeah, and honestly, it depends on who. A lot of times the answer to that depends on who we're talking with within a department. Every role is going to look at it differently, right? We know coaches first and only thing when they get out of bed in the morning a lot of times is, how am I going to go recruit and retain my best players? How am I going to win games?
Yep.
So sometimes it is, okay, maybe they see insurance as a way to help them recruit and retain their athletes. If they do, great, they're going to see a value in. If not, great. There's a different type of insurance that you can always kind of work into, but what a coach is going to care about is risk visibility. They need to know, okay, when I'm making the decision to go recruit a player, how likely is that player to be a good ROI on this investment that we're going to put out? Sometimes we've seen insurance actually influence the way a contract is put together, in the sense of, hey, if I know I'm going to have an injury protection, insurance on this certain contract, I know that our university's dollars are protected. Maybe I do go take a swing on a kid that's had some injury problems in the past, because I know even if that happens, great, our money's protected, and we can go make another strategic decision on that. Or, hey, I know our money's protected, we feel financially sound about it, maybe I am going to go front load some more cash in the form of a signing bonus, or actually put more money up front, as opposed to trying to hold money to the back. So we've seen this actually be a tool that both agents and coaches use for financial security, financial backing, in how they'll put a contract together. Then if you go talk to the CFO or head of development who's out there fundraising every day, they look at insurance as, well, this is great. Now I'm going to go tell our donor, hey, when you give money to us and you go help us, fund our revenue share in our NIL pool, that we are being good stewards of your money, that we're not going to have to come back to you a year later and say, hey, actually, can you give just a little bit more? The guy that we spent the money on last year tore his ACL and wasn't able to play, and now we need to go replace him. So, it's been in the news, right? And that's been the great thing, is like Calipari's talked publicly about it. Like, I think he coined it booster insurance, which is incredible branding on his part, by the way. I've got to point that out, booster insurance. But being able to essentially go to those boosters and donors and say, hey, we know that we're facing a ton of donor fatigue. That's one of the most common things that ADs are up against right now. Great. These donors are smart guys, right? They've built a lot of businesses on their own. Are you being good stewards of my money? And do you have fiduciary responsibility of it? And this is a big tool, and really a piece that can say, yes, we are being responsible with that money.
My favorite part of the John Calipari situation was all of the reporters immediately in the comments were like, you mean players' health? Because he was it's dudes invent public radio, dudes invent public transit. John Calipari invented players' health.
I did, like, I was seeing it and I was like, hey, you know what? On two sides, I'm like, I'm glad it's being talked about. Like, I love, the concept, even though it's not us directly doing, I'm like, hey, this is still good that it's being talked about and it's, being discussed. And on the other hand, like in the comments, I'm like, maybe I guess our marketing's work. That's awesome. That's good. I remember immediately texting it, to some folks, like, I guess we've done a good job at telling our story the last year.
So you're obviously a person that's been involved in NIL in so many different ways, shapes, and forms, right? If you were to sit down with someone, whether they be an athlete, a brand, a university, they're all trying to navigate NIL. What are the pieces of advice that you give them to try to help navigate NIL?
Be comfortable dealing in chaos, and be very flexible and adaptable. So, I've just being in this industry, I've gotten to work with a ton of new brands that have entered this space and new companies that have entered this space.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the first things I always say from a pure business side is, if you think you're going to put a 1-year strategic plan together, think differently. Try a 1-month strategic plan. And I quite literally learned this lesson the hard way. A few years back, I was like, great, I'm going to build out a 1 and a 3-year strategic plan of, right. That's what you would do at any other normal business, is sit down and actually put something like that together. And I tell you, I was kicking myself because maybe 60 days from the actual publishing of said strategic plan, I was like, what was I thinking? Like so many things happen in those 60 days, where there's, new legislation being proposed, the House settlement kicked in around that time. I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to rip that up and throw it away. So really, I would say this sounds very, counterproductive to say, but actually think less long-term and think more, how can I own the next quarter? How can I own the next 2 to 3 months? And be, whatever your business plan is, make sure that is flexible and adaptable to change, because there's so many forces going on in, DC and Indianapolis and Atlanta and the SEC offices, in the powers that be in college sports, that are so far out of any business's control. You better make sure that your business, your agency, your brand, whatever it is in the space, can always quickly adapt and pivot to this.
That was so good. I wrote that down. Where do you see, and I think this is a great segue. So all of these changes that are happening, right? It like you said, like, shame on you for planning for a year. Think like a month, max 3 months ahead of time. How do you see with how fast and how quickly things change? And then not only do they change, but then the changes get implemented, yada, 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 so on and so forth. Where do you see companies like yourself or other NIL vendors playing into NIL as it continues to evolve?
Yeah, I think really it's going to be adapt to the needs of the universities. The universities are the ones that ultimately drive the ship of this. It's athletes and universities, obviously, but from the sense of a kind of vendor, right? A business in this space.
Mm-hmm.
How can you always be the best partner to universities? They're the ones that are ultimately driving the ship behind a lot of this. So whenever we think about anything, whether that is partnership wise, strategy wise, product wise, we always have the universities as top on this. So, one that I look at here is our recent partnership we did with Teamworks, where we joined in as the exclusive insurance provider, for Teamworks on the collegiate side, with their GM product. And I look at that as, okay, hey, we're the leader in our space in what we do, in NIL insurance, NIL risk management. They're obviously the leader in what they do, from the, collegiate sports tech side of things. It makes a ton of sense for us to bring this together. We're not, competing against each other in any way. It makes a ton of sense for us to kind of join forces with them and really bring this to the doorstep of a lot of universities. So that's how I like to approach things when I look at things from a partnerships or strategy standpoint, is what's always going to be the best, that. All right, run it back like 20 seconds. I always look at this as what's going to be, ultimately the best driver that's going to fill a need for a university.
So Players Health has had a huge year. A lot of really awesome partnerships that have been announced. What's next? Are there any features, more partnerships, or initiatives that you can preview with us?
It's going to be a constant evolution of what do we need to adapt to in the market, where schools, looking for additional solutions. And that's the great piece is we've built such strong partnerships with our university partners where, there are best test cases, right? Where they'll actually come back and tell us like, hey, what you've got is awesome. It'd be even more cool is if you could do X, Y, Z. And then that's where we go and take it back to the drawing board. That's where we go work with our partners and our carriers to go develop and build additional things. So really the Teamworks partnership has been one that, was a heavy lift and one that, I got to work with those guys on for a long time. And I couldn't be more excited about that when I've gotten to work, with and alongside a lot of people on that team and their leadership side for a few years now. So that was a no-brainer, right? Like I love working with, good people and good people that have a great product. So really I'm going to lean into how do we own that and really make the best, ROI out of that partnership for both us, Teamworks, and all of those partners at the institutional level.
Okay, shifting gears for a little bit as we kind of wind this down. What has been your favorite? These are questions that we ask to everybody, but what's been your favorite NIL deal that you've either seen out there in the wild or one that maybe you were a part of during your time at KU?
Okay, I'm gonna give one from KU and then one from Campus Inc. NIL store.
Okay.
Both of which were a ton of fun. Probably my favorite one at Kansas was, we got to coordinate a pretty large scale deal between a few of our star athletes and Wendy's and the franchise in Lawrence. What that meant is I got to eat a lot of free Wendy's. I had a lot of business meetings, at a Wendy's location. But what was really cool about that was, the athletes, we had athletes across football, men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, soccer, a ton of different sports, right? And what was so cool about that was, you see the people that put this Wendy's who are, C-suite folks, right? And they are in awe and they're fans of meeting these college athletes. And I'm like, guys, you're with, business execs, across the world every day and Fortune 500 people, and you're pumped and you think it's the coolest thing in the world, to have a 20-year-old athlete come visit your, franchise. And I'm like, that is such a cool piece. And I made sure like, hey, the athletes, like, do you understand like kind of who's putting this deal together? But then I would drive by it every day on the way to work and you'd see the faces of those athletes up, in front of the Wendy's store. And that was always a really cool reminder of like, this right here, NIL gets a lot of headlines, especially back then. It wasn't what it is. I'm like, that is NIL. That is what Ed O'Bannon fought for, right? Is so athletes could, partake in that and brands could get the ROI. Love that one. Second one at Campus Inc. that we did, Purdue was one of our top schools that we got to work with, and those people were great. And for Purdue basketball, we basically did like a whole Christmas line, like elf collection of, all their, guys in like different elf and Christmas themed, shirts and hoodies and hats. And, the players had a lot of fun leaning into it and students were wearing around campus. So I like the fun kind of, let's throw a little heart behind it. But those were two deals that I really enjoyed being on the other side of.
I love it. Okay. So with this one, take us back to your former playing days, right? You're at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. You're a baseball student athlete. What's that one brand that you're shooting your shot with for an NIL deal?
At Corpus Christi, it would have been, I don't know how many of our listeners are going to be regional and know this, is Whataburger.
Yes.
Whataburger being founded in Corpus Christi, like, just down the street from where our school was. I was banging on those doors every day of how do I get some coupons for, I don't even need the cash. Just let me just go get some free food there. Or I would say either Whataburger, or maybe if like Callaway or Titleist wanted to hook it up with some golf clubs and some balls. Those would have been the two that I really would have fought for there.
I would have no problem getting paid in honey butter chicken biscuits. I'd be set for life.
Yeah, any day of the week. Now, our trainer and strength coaches may not have been the biggest fan of if I was just eating those all day, every day. They probably would have preferred maybe like a Whole Foods sponsorship standpoint.
Tate comes back in 30 pounds in the off season.
Yeah, pure muscle, right?
Okay, so this is the last question that we ask everyone. You, like myself, live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. What's your go-to food spot? Somebody's in town. Let's say you and I were to link up. Where's the spot that you'd take me to?
We're going to get the best Tex-Mex that exists, and we're going to Las Palmas in Dallas. And you look like you didn't like that answer.
No, I have. It's funny that you mention it. I have not been there, but I literally I'm doing a little staycation next month with my wife, and that was on the list because I haven't been there.
Good. I would love to say go in there and tell them I sent you, but they have no idea who I am. But no, Las Palmas is the spot, and specifically go and get the steak tacos.
Okay.
The steak tacos is the go-to there.
Okay. I will meticulously report my findings, and I'll text you with the evidence after I order.
Maybe one of our listeners happens to be the owner or GM of Las Palmas, and that's the next NIL deal that we can work out of this.
That's the next great NIL deal for NIL Edge. Well, Tate, I really appreciate it. This has been a really awesome discussion. Just learning more about a side of NIL that you didn't really think existed, or how insurance would play a part in it. And I really thank you for your time and talking with us.
Absolutely, really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks again to Tate Gillespie for joining us today and telling us a little bit more about players' health. If you'd like to connect with me, Sterling Randle, feel free to do so on LinkedIn. Also, check out nilnewsstand.com for more episodes. You can also check out Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more. You can also find out more about digital sport by Hot Paper Lantern at hpldigitalsport.com. And you can also find us and NIL Newsstand on LinkedIn. If you're interested in coming on the show, reach out to me, or you can also reach out to Kyle Ems at info@nilnewsstand.com. Hope everyone has a fantastic day, and we'll see you again next time.